Boston is known as the location where the American Revolution began. But as the Boston Preservation Alliance knows, all our city's neighborhoods have a rich, timeless history. The soul of Boston resides where people and places interact, and which places we choose to preserve reflects our society's values. As the city evolves, it's now more important than ever to be thoughtful about how Boston changes. At the Boston Preservation Alliance, we recognize that at sites throughout the city, the voices of the past and the voices of today teach us that there's more to the story. Good evening, everyone. I'm Katie Couric, and I am delighted to be with you tonight to virtually host the 32nd Annual Preservation Achievement Awards. I am really happy to support the Boston Preservation Alliance, a nonprofit organization that's been protecting places, promoting vibrancy, and preserving the unique character of Boston for over 40 years now. The theme of tonight's award program is There's More to the Story. We're going to get to know more about the faces behind the facades and the stories of their challenges as well as their big accomplishments. Tonight, the Alliance will be celebrating 9 award-winning projects and 2 exceptional individuals who have had a great impact on how history and a modern and evolving city work together to assure us as Boston evolves, it doesn't erase its essence or the diverse stories of its people. I'm really excited to be here in part because one of the exceptional individuals being honored tonight is my very own brother-in-law, Jim Batchelor. Jim is being presented with the President's Award for Excellence later in the program, and I can't think of anyone more deserving. I hope you'll stay with us to enjoy my conversation with Jim and hear more about the passion he brings to his work and how it's left an indelible mark on so many neighborhoods in Boston. I absolutely love Boston and its rich blend of old and new, and I'm pleased to support the Alliance's work to maintain that character. As we all tune in virtually, it's a perfect time to pause and reflect on the places we miss, the traditions connected with them, and the memories they evoke. It's also a time to focus on the many stories we haven't told and to double down on efforts to highlight the incredible contributions that have for too long been underrepresented in our history. And that is exactly the work of the Boston Preservation Alliance, listening, guiding, and questioning, always questioning how we can more thoughtfully preserve our past while building towards the future. And we'll have some fun trivia questions to ask you about historic places, so stay on your toes and be ready to answer. We'll also be inviting you to vote for your fan favorite of all the 9 projects you'll see tonight. The winner you choose will be revealed at the end of the program. You'll hear from me again throughout the night, but for now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the president of the Boston Preservation Alliance, Chris Scoville.
Thank you, Katie, for hosting tonight. Given your experience all around the nation, all around the world, your kind words about the Alliance and our role are so meaningful. And thank you all for joining us in this strange virtual world. The staff and our team have been working hard to create a special night that's active and engaging. I'd like you to ponder what value you place on the historic character of Boston. What would our city be like if Boston's physical connections to the past were wantonly erased? Think how quickly that can happen if we aren't vigilant, and why the Alliance's voice is so important. What's that worth to you? Think about it. There's a Donate Now button below the video on your screen. Feel free to click it any time during the night, multiple times if you're so inclined. You'll hear more about that later, but please be sure to express your support. We've been an alliance since our founding over 40 years ago, and that means we empower the voices of our individual, organizational, and corporate members. We amplify the voices of neighborhoods. It's a central part of our mission to hear as many perspectives as possible, to consider all of those voices, and to keep the broad community informed on issues, and to advocate, to be the voice for the many historic places that make Boston special. Even businesses we oppose from time to time on specific proposals recognize our mission is essential. I want to thank our dedicated sponsors, in particular, our leaders, the Drucker Company and Goulston & Stores, our underwriters, Elkis Manfredi, Grow at Annenberg, Renaissance Properties and Roger and Marianne Takeff, and wind companies. Our advocates, Arrow Street, Brunner Cott, CBT Architects, and CV Properties, Eastern Bank, Grand Masonry, HYM Investment Group, Ipswich Bay Glass Company, Keith Construction, NER Construction Management, Redgate Hilco, Related Beal, S&F Concrete, Sasaki, Saunders Properties, and Shawmut Design and Construction. We also want to thank our over 100 sponsors. I promise I won't read them all out loud, but you'll see them on the screen next to me. I want to especially show our gratitude to those of you who were, in spite of these incredibly challenging times, able to maintain or even increase your contributions. As you know, the income from this event comprises a significant portion of our budget, and so your support is especially crucial this year. Thank you. And now it's time to see if you're paying attention. It's time for your first trivia question. Can you identify this repurposed historic space that's behind me? Click the Answer Trivia button below. And now, I'd like to introduce Greg Gaylor, the Executive Director of the Boston Preservation Alliance.
Thank you, Chris and Katie, and hello, everyone. And yes, we're responding live to your trivia answers. Now, here are a few hints. This is a project where our input helped lead to 2 restored historic buildings and hundreds of new housing units. Now, the process of elimination should easily help you. It's known today as the Overlook development. Did you get your answer in? The answer is St. Gabriel's Monastery Complex in Brighton. How'd you do? Now, I'll give you a head start on the next trivia question. It's behind me. Well, it's been a challenging year, but our active role in the city continues. We're adapting and engaging with community and decision makers. And just look at this event. We have people participating from all over the country. Over 600 people are with us tonight. One example of our work this year is our inaugural Advocacy Certification Training Program, adapted from in-person to virtual. We began in Brighton, but this program will continue throughout the city's neighborhoods, teaching the residents the ins and outs of preservation regulations and explaining where, within the city approval process, they can weigh in. It's important that everyone effectively make their voice heard to support, oppose, or offer suggestions to enhance how their city evolves. Watch for upcoming sessions. We continue to offer guidance at countless virtual hearings and meetings on all sorts of proposed changes to the city. Our website, bostonpreservation.org, is a great way to stay updated on our advocacy work. And be sure to follow us on social media and read the e-news we send out bi-weekly. We pack in a lot of material to keep you informed. Now, here's one of our ongoing advocacy projects behind me. Can you identify it? It's an odd one for sure. Now, it's a brutalist building that we are now calling heroic. Now, we're in active dialogue with the state about how they can both preserve the remarkable buildings on this site and increase density for more state offices. Maybe you read about it. The answer? This is part of the Government Services Center between City Hall and the West End, specifically the Lindemann Building, designed by internationally known architect Paul Rudolph. See our website for more information. And now, on to the main event, our awards. We had a robust group of nominations this year, and I thank our selection committee for making the difficult choices. Now, like me, you're probably a bit zoomed out, and I promise you tonight will be something different. We're with you live, and tonight we're providing an appetizer to wet your whistle on each winner, to tweak your curiosity and leave you wanting more. There's amazing technical work for each that shouldn't go under-recognized. Skilled craftsmen played a critical role in each project. There's complex financing, permitting, and involvement of community groups, designers, owners, and engineers. In the history of these places, it's deep and diverse, inspiring, and fun. While we were out, we heard so many stories, from Cardinal O'Malley climbing the scaffolding at the cathedral, to German spies captured in a rowboat off Graves Light during World War II. Tonight, we give you a taste because our awards will continue. On Thursdays at noon for the next 5 weeks, we'll be premiering on Facebook and YouTube longer videos that go into more depth on each award winner. We hope you will join us then. Tonight, we tempt you to see that there truly is more to the story. Starting with our first group of winners that exemplify that the stories of our past that are triggered by place are essential to the experience and life of Boston. But history is about people. Bricks and mortar play a part, but preservation is also about keeping places relevant and their stories alive.
The thing about the square is it's always been a place of activity, and that activity has reflected the time period. In 1634, a market was set up. You then move into the 1770s, and it starts to be referred to as North Square. And then you move into an immigrant period, starting with the Irish up into the Italians now. So as time went on, the square continued to evolve as the community evolved. The square needed work for a long time, but there was also a sense that we needed some kind of public art.
Well, it was with shock and horror that we realized we had to do 4 sculptures, but it was fairly early on.
Community collaboration was critical with this particular project, but it really was a total partnership.
Maps played a big part in us developing all these sculptures, especially this one, of course, which was actually taken from digital data of the city.
The community itself came together and said, well, one thing above all should be integral to this work, and it tells the story of maritime history in the square. This piece really comes directly out of that.
This is a relief sculpture. It was derived from maps from 1798. It's quite extraordinary to actually realize the changes that have taken place in the city.
We're looking at the last sculpture that we made. The concept itself was always to talk about how the North End has been the gateway for new arrivals to this country. And this is actually an image of a feast day happening in North Square.
There is no particular moment in time that you see when you're in North Square. You see a sweep of history. I think that's a really interesting part of the preservation business. You often have time frames that don't match, but belong together.
Welcome to Hub History, where we go far beyond the Freedom Trail to share our favorite stories from the history of Boston, the hub of the universe. Hi, I'm Jake.
And I'm Nikki.
Hub History is a weekly podcast, scripted, researched, where we talk about the history of Boston, to uncover stories and people who are often left out of the more mainstream narratives of Boston history.
Our intro to the history world is that we were looking for opportunities to share history, and we ended up docenting for a summer at the Shirley Eustace House. And between tours, we were trading back and forth our favorite stories from Boston history.
Maybe trying to one-up one another.
Maybe. I won. And then the idea for the podcast was born.
Every week I think we're out of ideas, and every week there's another story about Boston history that we haven't told before. We'll be airing an episode about the first Black woman to earn a medical degree in the U.S., who until just about a month ago was buried in an unmarked grave in Hyde Park.
You know, the point of learning the history or studying the history is to inform the present. And so, you know, we bring it into the context of the 21st century. We were always taking notes, right?
Yeah.
Always writing things down.
You hear an interesting story, you jot a note, and then you find a thread to pull on. It may not be the story you originally heard that you end up telling, but you find a way into a story. There's always something new that's old to talk about.
One of the most important events in the history of Boston was the famine in Ireland. Very shortly after they arrived, they raised $1.5 million to put up what was then the largest Catholic cathedral in the United States. It had been so long since attention had been given to the cathedral, we realized that an awful lot of the infrastructure needed to be shored up, and at the same time, we wanted to make it a restoration.
You look at the condition of the cathedral when we arrived. The inside was kind of dark, and the lighting was functional, but not 100%. It just looked like it was ready to pop. The challenge at first was, how do you bring it to life?
There was a sense that you were someplace very special. Everybody stepped up and recognized that this isn't something you get to do every day.
My favorite has got to be the wood trusses in the ceiling. They are functional and yet so decorative. I think there's so much care in the design of this church. You feel elevated doesn't have anything to do with your position in society or race. And I think that's important to take away and bring to all of our other projects.
It's always been a church of immigrants. Today, the largest immigrant population here are the Spanish-speaking, but we also have an Ethiopian community, an Eritrean community. The church is a church of immigrants, and Boston is a city that has always had so much vibrancy because of people coming from all over the world to make this their home.
Hello, I'm Leslie Reed, a member of the Alliance Board of Directors and CEO of Madison Park Development Corporation in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. This is the 7th year we've given you, the public, the power to select which of our award winners is your favorite. Online voting began a month ago. Voting's been active, and it's a close race. So tonight, you can add to the tallies after all the awardees have been presented. Please make sure your favorite gets your boost tonight. Stay tuned. You've heard the phrase "more to the story" several times tonight. The Alliance wants to tell not only more about sites we know, but to broaden the stories, to rethink what histories get told and who tells them, and what stories haven't been told, what sites get preserved and who decides. The winners we present tonight each have fascinating stories in their history and rebirth. Each exemplifies the types of projects we'd like to see more of throughout the city and our neighborhoods. We know there is rejuvenation, transformation, and stewardship from Eastie to Roxbury, that people across the city care so deeply about their history and the places that contain it, and they're working to create lives for these places for future generations. But unfortunately, much of this deeply personal and engaging history, particularly outside of the downtown core, faces real threats. Legacy businesses that are the essence of so many communities were challenged even before COVID. The threat now has become existential, and we've already lost so many, from Jacob Worth and Durgan Park to many less known not far behind them. The Alliance hears daily from neighbors, community groups, and longtime residents, all concerned about their neighborhood's soul and its possibility of fading away. We, in turn, provide information, guide, and engage when we can. Our staff is small but mighty. In the last 5 years, we've been engaged to influence preservation-friendly outcomes in over $2.2 billion worth of projects. Last year alone, we attended over 125 meetings, discussed projects on 150 calls, and nearly 33,000 website visits provided additional information. And we're set to exceed those numbers this year. In more recent months, we've been involved in the challenging discussions over our history and the monuments in our city. We've highlighted Boston's Green Book sites and brought attention to legacy businesses. We've been emphasizing that more perspectives can only strengthen our movement and truly show that there is indeed more to the story. And that's why I got involved. The Alliance is active. The Alliance voice is strong. And there is more work to do, and I hope that you'll partner with us in that work. The Alliance continues to fight every day for historic places of all types. Can you identify this legacy business behind me? Click Answer Trivia below. It's important to note that preservation isn't just about saying no, but about working together with project teams and neighbors to come up with creative solutions that allow the city to move forward without erasing our past. There was quite an uproar when this site closed, but a proposal just surfaced for this restaurant and bar that would keep portions of the original. Here's a hint. It was the first place in the nation to serve Sam Adams on tap. Did you recognize this image of Doyle's and JP? The Alliance works to find better solutions to the challenges faced by historic places daily, and here's Katie to tell you more.
Congratulations to the award winners we've seen so far. Yay. They truly inspire me, as does the work of the Alliance, preserving and protecting Boston's character while promoting thoughtful, contextual, and welcoming designs for the future. You know, I've been in countless cities throughout my career, and I always find the historic pedestrian scale of Boston so special. If you agree that the Alliance's work is critical to finding harmony between old and new, preserving while growing Boston as a beautiful, welcoming home to everyone in the community, now is the time to make a donation and invest in the success of the Boston Preservation Alliance. So, yes, please click Donate Now below the video and decide for yourself what is the highest amount you can give to make sure the voice of the Boston Preservation Alliance is heard at hundreds of meetings every single year. If you want the Alliance to continue to work with neighborhood groups to help them advocate for preservation of their history, if you want a voice that fights for a balance between old and new, then help assure the Alliance has the resources it needs so it continues to have an important voice. Make sure the Alliance's voice and the voices of Bostonians who are worried about their neighborhoods is always heard. Believe me, in my years in the world of politics and covering the news, I can say for certain that groups like the Boston Preservation Alliance are critically important and truly essential. So click Donate Now below the video to protect and preserve this beautiful historic city, to help the Alliance work with more neighborhoods to better tell and protect the stories and places less well known, but no less important. But I want to say to all of you, thank you in advance for the financial help you can commit to tonight. Every single dollar makes a big difference.
Thank you, Katie, and thank all of you for responding to her request. Our goal tonight is $25,000. Now, I'm hearing that support is already rolling in from small to large, and every dollar truly counts. Now, think about all those coffees you're not buying on the way to work, the Uber rides, the dry cleaning. Put that money to work to help support our mission so that the city you return to when all this craziness is over is a better historic place than ever. Now, we made tonight free to provide access to as many people as possible, but we do depend on this event to allow our work throughout the year. And thanks to the generous support of our Vice President, Roger Tackiff, and his wife, Marianne, all gifts made tonight will be matched 1-to-1 up to $10,000. Help us make this match. Your contribution now will have double impact. So click the Donate Now button below the video and help us earn this additional $10,000. Now, our next group of award winners highlight that today's preservation moment is just one dot on a long timeline. Neighborhoods and uses may change, but the stories contained within these walls is cumulative, with our award winners curating the immense power of these historic places.
I have a long history with the Dillaway-Thomas house. The reason why the building has the name it has, Thomas was the Patriot General in Roxbury during the American Revolution. And then in the 19th century, a very popular educator, his name was Dillaway, the headmaster of Boston Latin, lived here. By 2000, there was a lot of deferred maintenance and eventually raised enough money to have a complete repair and add a set of permanent exhibits.
More people are utilizing it, I think, in my opinion. It's one of the best views in the city. People are coming, they're exercising in the space. A lot more events are happening in the space.
When people come here, if that activity doesn't have to do with history itself, they are coming to a space where the background will be history.
I'm a mother of a 6.5-year-old. I really want him to understand the community that he comes from. And so I think that it's important for us to make sure that we're helping to pass that baton to the next generation.
This was a labor of love. It was clearly hoped that this would be a profitable venture, but it was really driven by the fact that we wanted to create a landmark. This building was purpose-built as the home of the YWCA. That was the first YWCA in America. It functioned in that way for 40 or 50 years. We were one of the few people that actually recognized the value of this building. Our concept was so out of the box. A lot of people in the neighborhood weren't quite sure how we would execute it. It was an expensive job.
When we were talking about this project, a lot of it was, celebrating Boston's first. Our concept and our philosophy was we have a beautiful building, great bones, great history. We should be celebrating it. We wanted to do, some things to highlight it and then a lot to contrast against it because it's just an interesting idea when you bring a modern flair in. So we found ourselves exposing all sorts of things, the concrete columns that pop in and out of rooms, the original mailboxes.
For us on the hotel side, it makes it such a joy to be able to sell the property to our guests. We retained the dormitory feel that came with the Y. In doing so, we were able to offer up a lot of different room types, which you're not going to find at traditional hotels. We have rooms that have 2 bunk beds in it. We have rooms with a triple that has a king bed with a twin over it. You can accommodate parents traveling with a child. You can have a girls trip where all 4 girls get their own bed. I think it's really important to occupy a building that has a soul. The Revolution Hotel has a lot of soul.
To this moment, the neighborhood comes up and thanks us. As a developer, you don't usually have people put their arms around you and say thank you for what you did. So we take a lot of pride in that. We took a building that was a liability and we turned it into a wonderful asset.
The building was a residential hotel. It was constructed in 1926 when Kenmore Square was the hub of transportation into the city. The folklore is Babe Ruth had a suite on the 8th floor that he was particularly fond of. It had a history before it was a dormitory. It had a history once it became a dormitory. Again, it's folklore, but I think it's based on truth, which is Martin Luther King met his wife in this building. That and the other stories that built up from our alums that lived in this building was very powerful, a very powerful message. So we wanted to keep and preserve that.
At some point in time between 1949 and when we arrived, the retail store openings at the first floor had been blocked in. There was not a great connection to the street.
It created this very sterile, uninviting environment for a pedestrian. And part of our goals was to activate that and to let people see from the outside that there's life on the inside.
BU has always done a great job in being a good neighbor. We worked with residential groups and talked about the design, and it certainly informed how the Pocket Park design ended up.
Our goal is to get students to graduate. That's what we do. And if we can be really good neighbors and citizens of the city and respect the history at the same time, then I think it's a win for everyone.
I was never a lighthouse person, but there was an auction a friend of mine put me in touch with from the government. They were selling Graves Light, and I thought to myself, well, maybe I just get a free trip and go and check it out. It just took my breath away. And it got me thinking, well, wouldn't it be fun to have a little summer cottage, but instead of driving 2.5 hours to get to Winnipesaukee, you could have a place all by yourself about 20 minutes from home. I kind of tricked my wife. She was away and I just texted her. I said, hey, can we buy a lighthouse? And she said, sure. So I was like, well, stop asking. She said, sure. So that's what got it going. I wound up with it. It was really dark and dirty and leaky and disgusting when we bought it. Any historic building that's been neglected for a long period of time has a lot of challenges. But having a lighthouse that's offshore is sort of a multiplier. We spent the first year just doing masonry repairs, waterproofing. The Coast Guard had gutted the whole place, but there were little clues that were here, like there was a windowsill along one window, and there was one door that was completely coming apart, but we looked at it and it looked like the original door. It was almost like some divine being gave us just enough clues to be able to fit these important architectural features back into the place. The more you get to know it, the more you realize that it's the stories that are in that building. That's what's even more interesting than the building itself. old sea stories with captains and pirates and, German spies and everybody. And they all come together to give the place such a richness. So the building basically just becomes a container for these wonderful stories about how the world used to be.
What amazing stories, and I hope you're like me, anxious to hear more, and the videos will be rolling out over the next 5 Thursdays at noon. And if you want to continue to help projects like those happen, help us reach that $25,000 goal and meet that $10,000 match, click Donate Now below. But I want to be sure you're paying attention with the trivia question. What is this threatened property behind me? It sits sadly vacant and deteriorating, waiting for reuse. Click Answer Trivia below and guess. Now, our final group of award winners demonstrate the complex financial realities of saving historic buildings. Sometimes the costs of restoration simply can't be met by the revenue generated once restoration is complete. That's why we played an important role with our DC delegation to save the federal historic tax credit back in 2017. It's why creative new construction within or adjacent to historic properties can lead to successful preservation projects. Now, our trivia answer is a project that could be saved by utilizing this strategy, historic tax credits and sympathetic new construction adjacent. This is the Ali Ablana Brewery on Heath Street in Mission Hill. Did you get it right? We successfully nominated this for the state's most endangered historic resource list in 2018. But unfortunately, a recalcitrant owner is letting the property deteriorate. Help us advocate for a better solution for this amazing historic resource. Now, our final group of winners.
When we first learned of the opportunity to develop and redevelop this building, we thought of how the whole combined building could feel like one building and a really exciting, vibrant use for the neighborhood.
The original John Jeffries House Hotel building was the original site of the Mass Pioneer nurses' residence. One of the things that was really important as we were thinking about how to add to this building is keeping the story of the original building foremost in your mind. The goal was not to overpower it, but to complement it and to celebrate a relationship between old and new.
My favorite part is the intersection of the old building with the new. This corridor that goes all the way up to the 5th floor. When we show our guests that this is the original brick, everybody's taking a picture.
When I look at the skyline, I see a timeline. This is our time, and we want to make sure that the mark that we leave is memorable and that we were good stewards.
The city itself is such a great blend of rich history and modern technology. And in some ways, this building mirrors that. You have the John Jeffries House, which is rich in history, and then you have the new building that not only welcomes more people to Beacon Hill, but also celebrates the combination of old and new.
Historic Boston first took a look at this building in 2001, and what interested us is this seemed to be prime, right in the middle of the Roslindale Village Main Street district.
The building was built in 1911, and it was one of these substations that were sprinkled around the Boston area for the purposes of powering street trolleys.
Parents always talked about the building, how it was just such a stain on the community that was so rich with other happenings. We started having like pop-up movie nights in the space when it was cleaned out. It was a huge deal. And from those pop-up movie nights, now we have a beer hall.
The idea of extending our business up into a space that was already community was exciting. I'm particularly interested in how a business can create good jobs that pay a living wage, that allow people to make their life in their own neighborhood. This space can do that because it once did.
I think the bigger story and better story here is the fact that you were able to create a whole new corner in Roslindale Village, catalyzed by historic preservation. It brings a whole new level of vibrancy to this project, to this space, to the neighborhood.
You've now seen all the winners. Which is your favorite? Click below and vote. I'll report out on the winner at the end of the night. No Supreme Court required. Now is the time in our program where we recognize individuals for their accomplishments. Our Codman Award for Lifetime Achievement in Historic Preservation and Conservation is named for John Codman, who played a central role in the creation of the Beacon Hill Historic District in 1955. This year, we recognize my colleague Carl Nold, who became president of Historic New England in 2003. At his retirement earlier this year, Carl left that organization, in fact, the world of preservation and museums stronger, not just in Boston, but nationally, with his roles as chair of the American Alliance of Museums and work with the International Committee on House Museums. Carl's career spans an important trajectory, starting in the 1970s through today. He evolved and pushed us to expand perspectives and methods. From training at Cooperstown through positions in Alexandria, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, Carl has long encouraged collaboration among museums, preservation organizations, and city and state preservation offices. In Boston, he encouraged us to work together toward common causes through a group of history museum directors that met for many years, and by encouraging our numerous preservation groups to reduce fragmentation. He and I demonstrated this goal when the Alliance moved our offices to Historic New England's Otis House in 2015. His 16-year role as a grant designator for Boston's George B. Henderson Foundation instilled a historic preservation philosophy that will live on. With the foundation, he leaves a legacy of supporting organizations that preserve Boston's diverse neighborhood heritage. Carl revitalized Historic New England's role as a participant in preservation activities and advocacy well beyond its museums and collections. He strengthened Historic New England in finances, membership, programs, visitation, school programs, holdings of properties and collections, and the accomplishments go on and on. But most important, in my estimation, demonstrating through action that the history we create today of the recent past is equally important to preserve and explore, that everyone has a voice, should be recognized, and can partake, add to, and benefit from the work we do as public historians. Carl, congratulations.
I thank you, Greg, and the Alliance for this humbling honor. Growing up in the New York suburbs, I was aware at a young age of the losses of cast iron buildings in Lower Manhattan in the battle to save Grand Central. I joined the National Trust while still a teenager, learning from pioneers of the movement. I believe that history comes right up to the present, and acted on that at Historic New England by building collections of 20th century heritage. The architectural photographs of Steve Rosenthal, the records of the Royal Barry Wills firm, Jim McNeely, and Tad Stahl, the Archive of Architectural Heritage Foundation's work to save Quincy Market and Old City Hall, and the drawings of Kalman, McKinnell, and Knowles for Boston's new City Hall. During my tenure, Historic New England organized 3 regional conferences for young people on 21st century preservation. We nearly doubled the number of preservation easements held, protecting the 1969 home of Earl Flansburgh and homes by Henry Hoover, Elliot Noyes, and Marcel Breuer. Historic New England continues to focus on its collection of heritage landscapes and 165 structures spanning 4 centuries. We acquired Phillips House in Salem and Eustis Estate in Milton, but also steadily supported advocacy work across the region, often played out behind the scenes. Although my long-planned retirement came in the midst of the pandemic, I'm pleased to leave Historic New England well prepared to weather the storms and carry out its mission in its 111th year. I encourage you all to continue to strengthen cooperation across our field, to recognize the enormous diversity that the built environment represents and the stories that can be told through structures of all periods and styles. That's what makes the preservation movement strong and relevant. I'm very grateful for this honor. Thank you all.
Thank you, Carl. Congratulations. Now, in 2015, we introduced our President's Award to recognize people or firms with exemplary work aligned with our mission. Tonight, Jim Batchelor joins those select honorees for the design quality, public engagement, and benefit to the city that are core principles in his work at Arrow Street. Jim is humble, always focused on the students and artists, the residents, neighbors, and environment benefiting from his work. That mindset reflects the roots of Jim's career, which still anchor him today. Viewing design and planning as tools to better serve people goes back to 1968 when he met his wife Clara as counselors at a DC camp for blind children. With his master's in planning from MIT in 1974, Jim's interview at Arrow Street led to an offer on the spot, and he's never left. He made partner in 1977 and was president from 2004 to 2018 when leadership shifted to the next generation of Amy Corte and her 5 partners, who I thank for their generous collaboration. After social services and residential planning for the state, Jim got his master's in architecture from MIT in 1981 and was a Loeb Fellow in 1984-85, and he was president of the Boston Society of Architects in 2009. Urban spaces became the focus of Jim's work. How can renovation and new construction enhance how people and communities build, adapt, and use their environment? Jim's robust portfolio contains housing, residential, workplace, retail, arts, and mixed-use urban complexes. He was central to the rejuvenation of the South End with the St. Cloud and the Boston Center for the Arts, in transforming closed schools into unique places to live, taking on a tunnel ventilation building adjacent to the oldest section of the city that you'll hear about in a moment, or Two Financial, skillfully modulating between the historic Leather District and the adjacent modern tower. But community work, such as the Women's Lunch Place and the Codman Square Health Center, stand out for me. Jim is also a talented painter and a stained glass artist and tends to a bonsai collection, which I'm told contains plants with longevity, but also its share of less successful empty bonsai pots. And this symbolizes something I truly love about Jim, a career of successes marked by a humility that keeps him learning and listening. And now let's hear from Jim and Katie as they talk about his work.
To be interviewing my brother-in-law, who is being honored by the Boston Preservation Alliance, as well as his firm, Arrow Street. Jim, it's great to have you. Welcome to my sofa.
Thank you.
I've known Jim, by the way, everyone, since I was 11 years old, so I can't believe I've known you for like 30 years, Jim.
Amazing.
How could that be? Anyway, I'm excited to be in conversation with my wonderful brother-in-law so everyone can get to know him a little bit better and learn more about the fantastic work he has done through the years. He's an amazing person, so he's very much deserving of this honor. Jim, you've done so many amazing projects and I think have improved the quality of life for so many Bostonians, I say very objectively. And I'm curious about the role that communities and neighborhoods have played in your work.
Yeah, community is like the starting point for virtually all of our projects. Arrow Street's approach is to look at the location and the neighborhood, the people who live around it, as well as the uses that will be taking place on the site, and to think about it from that point of view first.
There are a lot of community projects that there are a few that you're particularly proud of that you feel really reflected the values of the community. Can you tell us about a couple of those?
Sure. I mean, I would have to admit one of my favorite projects is called Artists for Humanity. It's a program for youths in the city of Boston, many of whom weren't necessarily having the easiest time in school, but this gives them a chance at kind of a new avenue. They can start by painting. They may initially make t-shirts. They may make murals on buildings, but the ideas are both to increase their confidence as an artist, but also their confidence at a skill set, which may help with employment or entrepreneurship. And we built a space for them that would enable them to have their programs.
I feel like you get the most satisfaction when your work is actually not just working with a physical space, but really enhancing and elevating the lives of people using those spaces.
Exactly. And a great thing about some of the projects, including that one, is there was a real interest on the part of the teenagers and the staff, we're only a couple years older than the teenagers, to participate in the design. And we had a great time doing that. We talked early about sustainability, which was growing awareness of the importance of that. And the students were all about that, pushed that hard. It was a huge success. The building was the first building in the City of Boston to be certified as a LEED Platinum building,
wow,
which is like a high watermark in sustainability. So that was great. Hyde Square Task Force is an organization that is in the Afro-Latin community of Jamaica Plain in Boston. And they also offer programs for school age and high school age kids. And in this case, there was an existing building, an old schoolhouse, which was good to have to start with, but actually old buildings can be incredibly difficult to work with. Really satisfying to see an old building of historic quality, although there was relatively little work we actually did on the historic stone on the outside, but we did preserve it, and we did get universal access. Another great example of a community-based project, this is the Dillaway-Thomas house, which got an award earlier. Our street has a small part in that project. We were part of a little more extended team providing support that enabled that project to come together.
And I'm curious how preservation figures into your work. I mean, it figures in it a lot, right?
It does. Sometimes it's clear. It's clearest when we're working on a historic building. That's often not the case. Sometimes it's a historic neighborhood that we're working in, and that sets up a whole set of issues we have to be careful about. Other times it may just be a non-historic but nevertheless highly functional part of the City of Boston, and we need to understand how we're doing impacts all that. We care about those neighborhoods. We care about the existing building stock. We're trying to both be a guardian of the past, but we're also trying to be guardians of the future.
So you really have to balance preservation and evolution in some ways and kind of really figure out that balance. And of course now, you know, for me, I know how important sort of these landmarks and these cultural centerpieces are in terms of projecting the values of a community. How do you place new buildings in historic neighborhoods and respect history, but also encourage progress and something that's modern?
The site we were working on is a very sensitive site because it's right next to what is really just a small shard of the oldest remaining old commercial buildings in the City of Boston, right down in the center. And there was a real concern on the part of the community, the state, the client, everybody. How do we put something like a vent building next to this intimate, small-scaled space? And it was fascinating. I think that it worked out pretty well. There was a decision to protect this small shard by giving the new building much of the same scale facade elements and a ground floor that was particularly sympathetic with the historic block next door. It was a combination of small scale building elements wrapped around a ventilation structure that extended 3 large stories below ground and 6 stories above ground over 2 subway stations.
Wow.
So it was a very complicated piece of construction.
It still kept the character of the area kind of fluid and seamless, if you will.
It has, and it has, in my mind, been great that the ground floor occupant of the building is the public market, and they offer all sorts of wares, locally made, very intimate scale that really fits with the Blackstone block next door and its history.
Well, Jim Batchelor, it's been very nice talking to you. Congratulations to you and Arrow Street on this award from the Boston Preservation Alliance. Give me 5.
Nice job, Jim.
Thank you, Katie and Jim. Congratulations and thank you to Jim and the entire Arrow Street team. And a big thank you to Jim's wife, Clara, a skilled and renowned landscape architect. We appreciate all the behind-the-scenes help you gave us on this event. Thank you to all the award-winning teams for your tremendous efforts, setting out projects we can point to as examples that others should follow. But now, it's time to announce the winner of tonight's fan favorite, the first time with live action voting. I hope you got your vote in. And I just received word from my team. Congratulations to the Cathedral of Holy Cross for being this year's fan favorite. Congratulations. Now, don't forget, tonight's presentations were just a little taste. There is certainly more to the story. Watch for emails from us or check out our website, bostonpreservation.org, for the details. But please reserve on your calendar, you heard me say it several times, Thursdays at noon. And I thank all of you for joining us from across the country. Thank you to more than 100 sponsors. And I'm happy to say we're well on our way to meeting that match. You can still donate by clicking Donate Now below. We'd really appreciate continued support. And thank you, everyone. Thank you to the Alliance Board and our staff, Allison Frazee, Matthew Dickey, Collie Noble, and Laura Lacombe for helping us out. And our creative team, Liz Page Associates, Patrick Farma, Laurie McClelland, Kelly Curry, and Teddy Woldemariam. Now, if you signed up in advance for our post-event networking, or you've been designated by a sponsor, go back to the networking link in the email you received from us. For those of you not continuing on, thank you for your support and for your time tonight. And don't forget, there's always more to the story.